Hello, Arbitrariers! Welcome to the Arbitrarium. I'm Dave, your host, and today my guests are Borg Ambassador Garrett number 10835, Senior 4chan Analyst Nicholas Harriman, and CIA Laugh Track Coordinator, codenamed Colorful. Today's topic is Materialism versus Idealism. So I think first we'll probably, as usual, want to define our terms, so I'll do that real quick. Just so you know what the hell we're talking about. Because materialism has a lot of different definitions.
Wow, we really are just jumping in.
Oh, yeah. I figured let's dive right in, let's define the terms, and then we'll go from there.
Catapult or an aircraft carrier.
So in this particular instance, we're talking, it's more philosophical definitions of materialism. So the definition, the working definition I've got for you is, reality, for materialism, reality is fundamentally constituted of matter. Consciousness is a product of material propagation and evolution. Reality is independent of the human consciousness, and the human consciousness experiences reality from within it, or by nature of being of it. So that's materialism. That's a little bit easier to understand. Then you've got
After all, you can't think with it if you ain't got a brain.
Yeah. And then you've got idealism, and I've got a really it's a more complex idea, but I have a shorter definition for it, which is reality is fundamentally constituted of thought. Consciousness defines material reality. So an example of that, an extreme example would be something that's called solipsism, which is the idea that reality is a construct of my consciousness. There's nothing outside of my perception or of perception, right? So perception manifests reality. So.
Or how I understood it, where things don't exist unless my mind is here.
Right.
Versus things exist whether, like, our mind exists because things exist.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think in our little group chat that we have, the way I talked about it is what's dependent on what. So, like in materialism, the mind is dependent on matter. Mm-hmm. You have to have matter before your mind comes up out of that, whereas the opposite is true of idealism.
Also, point of order, my actual title in the collective is 13 of 12.
Oh, okay. So, I apologize for that.
Thank you.
I should have consulted you on Star Trek information with that particular one.
I mean, we in the collective, we hoard information. We don't give it out a lot. So
No,
it's okay. It's to be expected.
Well, who can really
I'll be
blame
shoving 2 tubes in your neck later.
Oh, okay. Well, usually have to pay for that.
And
I mean, you'll be paying for it.
I'll post pictures of it.
All right, so I've got a lot of notes that I can jump into, but before I do any of that, I'll pop in when it's relevant. For now, we'll just start with Garrett. So, based on those definitions initially, well, where do you stand and why?
I am very much on the materialist side of things. If we can't really blend the two together yet, I'm bona fide materialist, because the way I'm looking at things happen without my knowledge. And if everything was constituted from my own consciousness, then nothing would happen unless I thought about it.
Well, nothing would happen unless you're consciously aware of it. You have a subconscious as well, and there's a whole universe of information down there.
Well, in idealism, a literal whole other universe.
Well, yeah.
In my subconscious, which, I don't buy. You'd have to have, oh my God, a subconscious that can keep track of each and every little atom going on. You would your subconscious would be God.
Not necessarily, because it could be a clockmaker issue. It could be an issue where your mind manifests it and then it just does what it does. Yeah, good.
So it only tracks. It's almost like a video game thing. You know, if you're looking at the screen, you see the screen, but that's all that's really being processed. The stuff going on behind you is just code. It's not being rendered.
Right. That would be the subconscious sort of part of it.
Right. Yeah, that's a little woo-woo for me.
A little too dada.
Well, if you want to use dada. I prefer the woo-woo alarm. You know? Not to be confused with the Bebo alarm. Or Booba? Booba. Booba. God, they look like testicles dipped in paint.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
You'll know, arbitrators. Look up Booba. I dare you.
All right, so are you making notes, or are you?
Well, I was just like using his if it is a, she said we can't kind of go in between and we have to choose one.
For now, at least.
Newer to the material, I've learned about the ideas, just didn't necessarily associate them with the terms. I would have to go more with materialism, a little bit based off of what Garrett said as far as, I mean, my mind can't make up the stuff that happens.
Mm-hmm.
Like, people talk to me about things all the time, and I'm just like nodding and pretending that I understand the words that they just said to me. And it's like, if my brain's not even comprehending the words that they say, how is it creating that dialogue?
Mm-hmm.
So if I have to choose one, that's what it would be.
Based on your own limitations, you're not that creative.
Yes.
Well, you kind of think like if idealism is true, and we'll say on this we're talking about solipsism in particular, because in solipsism it's you, it's not just everyone, it's not a collective creation of the universe.
All right, I'm switching sides because I want Dave to be a figment of my subconscious. That sounds great.
Would it make you feel smarter?
Oh! Ow!
We're all in the Buffy
I was trying to do my best
episode.
Andrew Dice Clay on that one.
Very nice.
So Idealism is pretty much the Buffy episode where she's in the psych ward and she's learning that
it's been
she has
forever.
made up all of the people.
Yeah, that would be.
That's
I would say that's more solipsism. If I'm understanding this right, so idealism is that it's not that it's specifically you, but the ideas in general are what create reality from all of us. Right, but solipsism. That's even weirder.
That is
You're right.
It's like I want to think of the Borg.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny that you are on the materialism side as the Borg.
Well, to me, what's weird about what's weird about idealism is that solipsism, to me, makes more sense than idealism in general, because if the entire universe is constituted, like it just spawned out of ideas, it makes a lot more sense to me that it spawned out of one person's ideas than everyone's ideas. And this is the point that makes me. I'm still somewhat of an idealist, but I'm still very much a materialist, because it doesn't make sense to me. I can't figure out how, if the universe were entirely idealistic, where it came out of, not solipsism, idealism, where it's everybody's minds, right? It's like, how the hell does it manage to be so damn consistent? Because we know how different perspective, like the variation of perspectives among 7.5 billion living people, right? How the hell does the material universe manage to stay consistent enough to use science on it at all if it's built out of 7.5 billion people's different perspectives of it?
Especially since the majority of those people are not scientists.
Yeah.
Especially if you consider children and I mean babies, and then just the big portion of adults who are like, science is made up. Like all of those groups outweigh the people who believe in the science, so why would it still be so consistent?
Right.
The only thing I have for that, and this is not a full answer as far as how I can wrap my head around things could be so consistent, is people seem to be hardwired to find patterns.
So we're going back to it. It could be a subconscious substrate thing.
Yeah. That's the only way I can parse that out. Just knowing what I know of human behavior, which I'm not a psychologist. I'm a guy who works at a box factory.
As bland as that is, there's something enjoyable about being able to say that.
Right?
There's like a Simpsons type of humor to it. Like this is.
So, am I the only one who, I mean, it was when I was reading about idealism, not realizing that there was a difference between solipsism and idealism, but the idea of solipsism where it's like, I am the only one who's making these things happen. I am the only true reality. Doesn't that make serial killers in a way? Like, isn't that almost what they have to believe to a point to make themselves okay with what they do? Like, I just feel like that just like basically says it's okay for serial killers to exist because you're the only thing that makes up your world.
I think that's probably. I think maybe it's a putting the cart before the horse issue with that one. I think it's probably that because serial killers have like the mentality that they do, they naturally fall along a solipsistic sort of view of the world. But I don't think they start with the idea that I'm the only real thing and then go and do whatever they want. I think it's more like they have, because they're sort of sociopathic, they have this idea that it's the lack of empathy, right? It's not
Right.
necessarily that they think that there aren't other people out there. It's that it doesn't matter.
Right. I guess like when I was reading about it, that was like the main thing that came to mind. I was like, well, serial killers, obviously. I mean, that's like the opposite of where these theories come from.
Right.
You know, like religion versus like, but serial killers. Like, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and well, Nick is using the restroom at the moment, so we're sort of, when he gets back, we'll ask him a little bit more about it. I'm trying not to go too far into this until he gets back.
There's a theoretical, like it's a theoretical physics kind of thought experiment kind of thing, called a Boltzmann brain. If you're familiar with the concept.
Yeah, we've talked about it a few times.
Okay.
That they don't know.
Yeah, a Boltzmann brain is through. We know that quantum particle or virtual particles pop out in and out of existence according to quantum foam and all this kind of thing. So technically, anything could pop out of nothing. What if your entire consciousness and history is actually a brain that popped out of nowhere with the right neurons set up to remember your entire life as you remember it?
As in, it fabricated the past of your life.
It didn't necessarily fabricate it. It would just popped into existence with your life as a memory.
So it made my
And then died in
brain,
cold space,
like the
but-
matter of my brain,
Right.
just existed right this
A
second
perfect
with all of
copy
the memories.
of your brain.
So, like,
by random chance.
they downloaded my brain.
No.
Well, let me finish this. They essentially put my brain in, for the sake of argument, put my brain in an external hard drive, and then booted it up in this other brain that immediately came to life and had all of my previous memories uploaded to it.
If that's the way you want to describe it, but
I would
it's more
say, yeah, it's
of a
been
random
different.
fluctuation that just so happens to have
okay.
your entire...
Boy, the odds of that. Holy shit.
Yeah, well, depending on how big the universe is.
Right, okay.
Oh, sorry.
Welcome back to the table.
Yes.
Well, you see, sometimes when you're a 4chan analyst, the things you've seen over the years just flood in and all at once, and you basically everything out of every hole.
He has a room that he has to go to in order to process these emotions.
It's called
Yes.
his ejacularium.
Yes.
If only were that. If only that were the only thing coming out. I've created new color palettes that only Mantis shrimps can see, and they don't want to. But it did give me time to, while I was on the floor, to think of a perfect film of idealism horror.
Okay.
In the Mouth of Madness. Now,
A little bit of Sam Neill action.
a little spoiler here if you haven't seen it. If you haven't, please do. It's one of the only...
The best and only adaptation of a Lovecraft story that I've actually seen in full.
It's not even a Lovecraft story. It's just heavily inspired by Lovecraftian horror. Cosmic horror. But in this case, it is essentially the world of ideas, the idealist reality, slipping its way into materialist reality and starting to change it.
Paprika.
Pretty much, yeah. Except this one involves more Sam Neill screaming and horrible monsters.
There is a lot of Sam Neill screaming.
Oh, yes, I mean... But would you agree that that's a good example?
Yeah, actually, that's a really good example. I didn't even think about that. In fact, I didn't even think about Paprika until now.
Yeah.
As a related thing. So, all right, Nick, do you feel like you fall more on the materialist end or more on the idealist end?
I have some idealistic ideas, but for the most part, I'm materialist.
If you had to pick one and stick to it.
For now.
Materialist.
Okay. What makes you say that? Kind of walk us through your thinking there.
A, a mind can't really function without a physical structure. I mean, even with the hard drive analogy, you have to turn it on, you have to build the hard drive, you have to plug it in. You know, you can't run the simulation if you don't have the hardware to do so.
Well, I think that's, if you're a materialist, that's true, but you're only working within the framework of being a materialist when you say something like that. So you're starting. I guess it's kind of begging the question, because if you're an idealist, then you say, well, the brain is a manifestation of the ideas, right? The material world came into existence because a collective or God or something like that thought of it, and then it developed a material version of itself that way. So you start with the ideas, and then things start manifesting out of that.
Well, the few idealist things I do believe is that the only true act of creation can come from, well, within the mind, because everything else is just shaping existing matter into something else.
That's fair. I mean, boy, you could dive into that.
Yep, I always drag us into the weeds.
Well, all right, so we've been through everybody else. I'll say that I also tend to be more on the materialist end, but I'm probably more of an idealist than anybody else at the table. I would think. We'll see how it shakes out once we get through the conversation. But the way that I tend to look at it is that as far as humans are concerned, the world is materialistic. Period. But as a person of faith, the way that I tend to think about it is that the universe, reality, because the universe isn't really a good word for that. Reality is technically idealistic. It's born of an idea, or a set of ideas at least, and that would be sort of God, for lack of better words, right? That's kind of the way that I tend to look at it. And what we experience through the material universe is that particular section of reality that has things organized. Mm-hmm. Outside of that, it's abject chaos, right? It's everything all at once. But the physical universe that we operate within is materialistic. That's what makes it organized. That's what makes us able to operate within it at all. And we're products of that. So we are products of a materialistic universe that was born out of an idealistic, what would you call it? An idealistic state of everything, right?
It's the course.
I'd say that really goes into a specific subset of philosophy, that being theology at that point.
I'm not sure I know what you're saying, and you're right, but I don't know if I'd use theology necessarily. I'd say metaphysics is probably a better example of what that falls into.
Well, I mean, at that point, you're having to call in a divine will to order things, which would, regardless of what religion it is, that is a very God exists idea, and that we're going to explore that. That's theology. Because you can't have theology without first establishing the baseline that a God exists.
I mean, that's fair. And I have reasons for thinking that way. I'm not going to go into all that, but it boils down to, so far as I can tell, in order to have anything at all, everything must be theoretically, I want to say possible, but that's not really a good word to use. Everything has to happen, right? And that's where you get that abject chaos, that sort of font of everything happening. And then, so you have all this chaos, which is everything happening all at the same time. There's no differentiation between one thing and the other. And that's what makes it chaos. And the reason I tend to go that route with the idea of God is because that's the organizing factor, right? We've been through this before. There are decisions being made. Their differentiation is a decision, right? It seems to me an active decision that this thing is different than this thing. And that, to me, from what I can tell, as much as I boil it down, requires some kind of, for lack of a better word, some kind of consciousness to do that. That action requires judgment, right? To differentiate one thing from another. But in order for one thing to exist, so far as I can break it down, it seems like everything must exist. Because you can't have a thing without the not thing. You only know that the thing, and you're going to hate this because I'm going back to Derrida, even though I don't like
fucking
Derrida.
ass. Out. You will never mention Derrida in this house again, Dave.
We've established this. This is the one thing he was right about, if anything at all.
Can we call him the D-bag, just not to mention his name?
But you can't have a universe unless you know what not universe is, right? Or at least acknowledge that there is a not universe. You don't have to know it, as we think of knowing something. But there has to be a not universe in order for there to be a universe. And if that's the case, the way I've logically spilled it out, then you have to have everything, all the time. That's the only way anything can exist, is that if everything exists in some form. And when you get to that point, nothing's differentiated. You got a big mass of chaos that never ends. And then you can organize that. So
Cats and dogs living together.
Feel like that was deep in the rabbit hole. I really tried to keep track of that. Not gonna lie.
You're not alone.
And
Well,
my brain, I
back up.
feel like we do need to back up a little bit.
I followed it. It's just it's very much Tiamat and Marduk to me.
I think for me, I know you were saying, Nick, the mind cannot exist without the brain structure, but there are a lot of experiences documented where people have been considered brain dead, and they or dead in general, but also like their brain waves stop, and they come back, and they're like, "Oh, I mean, I saw my body. I was above myself." And like, well, like your brain waves stop, so obviously, like, you made that up.
And then they'll accurately tell the doctor what happened in the room while they were brain dead.
And that's why, for me, it being entirely materialistic is just not... It doesn't make sense either. It's like, yes, like I would have to be more on the materialistic side, but there are certain phenomena that happen that just cannot be explained.
Well...
Or haven't yet.
Just because
Correct.
something hasn't been explained doesn't mean it can't be.
Correct.
Not
And
theology.
also on that, like, I think it's like there's a lot of things that happen paranormal-wise. There's probably an explanation for it that fits both camps. So it's not that ghosts don't exist. There's might be some scientific reason for them that we don't understand yet.
Right.
You can't mutually exclude the fact that science and ghosts exist.
We'll ask George Lucas. He'll come up with some bullshit for us.
Going a step farther from that one, okay, those documented cases. I'd need to see them. That's extraordinary claim. I need to see the extraordinary evidence. But has there been a situation where someone has had their head exploded, and then their thoughts continue and are manifest in reality?
I mean, as far as I know,
after there is no brain left.
right. As far as I know, nothing that we could
Nothing that we can observe.
Observe,
right now.
yes.
Or nothing that you would call hard science. You know, there are like, you know, psychics and stuff that can claim that they are communicating with the dead, and that people who will go to psychics will swear to you there's no way that they could know these specific things. But science can't test that.
I've had that experience before, so I can attest that
Well,
there are some people that can do things that seem inexplicable.
You can test it. You can test for it. It's just nothing. There's been no positive result recorded as of yet. I'm not gonna.
I think it probably boils down to being able to repeat.
I think,
repeatability.
you know, it is the closest you can get are not negative results. I think it's like, it doesn't mean yes, but also it's not no.
Well,
And that's a thing.
Inconclusive.
That
Yes.
homeless dude in Cincinnati, man.
But you can't, that doesn't mean that it didn't happen. That does mean that it is not a proven thing.
Well, science is a, by definition, materialist thing. It can
Right.
only
Yes.
study the material world.
And a limited version of it.
It can only, well...
You've got the material world, and then you've got what we are capable of observing based on the faculties that we possess.
Okay, yeah, you can have insane dream spaces. You can have a lot of things going on in your head that could not physically happen. So in that way, yes, there's, and many others, and we'll get into those later, ideas do shape reality, but not in that kind of woo-woo way.
Right.
But science can only study the physical world.
Yeah.
It can study what goes on in your head. It can't, and we're running into the hard problem of consciousness. It can study what's going on in your head, but it can't really figure out why.
This is a good topic to get on. So why don't you explain to the listeners real quick what the hard problem of consciousness is, and then we'll jump to Nick.
In a nutshell, the hard problem of consciousness is we know that your senses pick up certain stimuli. Those things are transmitted via electrical impulses into your brain. They're processed a certain way, but that doesn't tell you, okay, how does an electrical impulse tell you the flavor of chocolate?
Qualia.
It is qualia.
Right.
When you're getting the information of what chocolate tastes like, you're not getting a chemical breakdown in front of you.
Right.
This is what it tastes like.
It's an interpretation of the experience.
This is what it's
Sight.
Yeah.
Like how is this blue? Like we can define
Why
all
is
we want,
that
but I don't
sunset pretty?
see the layers of light. I see just what's in front of me.
You don't see like the specific nanometer spectrum of the light in front of you.
You're not literally looking at waves, or at least
How
not what you
it's
can.
Right.
interpreted
break
by
down.
the brain.
So that is the hard problem of consciousness.
Okay.
If we can figure out a solution to that, then we've pretty much got the entire human brain cracked.
Well, maybe we'll come back to that here in a minute, because that's a good topic to get on. But first, I want Nick to, because he's got some notes. What do you got?
In regards to out-of-body experiences, I am a huge skeptic because one of the people I know is my Aunt Marta, who is a special breed of wackadoo. The sort of woman who starts getting on heroin to teach her pill-popping son how easy it is to get off of heroin. That kind of wackadoo.
Update, as far as we know, she's still not off heroin. And this has been years.
I don't want to laugh, but it's funny.
Yeah.
It's sad, but it's
And
funny.
Her son is clean, last I heard.
Good for him.
But one of the things that I have learned through studying, the sciences of death, is that cell
Thanatology.
death... Well, huh?
Thanatology.
I suppose you could call it that.
Apparently, that's what it's called.
But cell death does not occur nearly as fast as people think it does. When a body is dying, it is dying piece by piece, part by part. The body is slowly realizing, hey, this place is shutting down. And that could go very well for those brain cells that are not firing as they should, or firing enough for machines to pick them up. But
They stopped hearing the voice of their god and were like, maybe we should get the hell out of here.
See, what I was hoping was going on was, various parts of my brain are shutting off, and what's flowing through. Closing time.
But I would say it's like if your argument is that maybe the machines just aren't picking up that the brain is still alive, that is just as valid of an argument as the idealism version of it. If the machines can't register it, what makes the idealism less logical than yours?
I suppose it doesn't, but I honestly think you can find more evidence for mine by the fact that those brain cells could still be logging information, but it's being interpreted really wrong, really wonky. Because people can experience that kind of stuff on hallucinogens, on all kinds of drugs, and it's just...
You ever done DMT?
I mean, who knows? Maybe those brain cells slowly shutting down in a certain order, you're going to see those clockwork elves.
Yeah. Knowing doctors who have talked about patients, kind of what you said earlier, that have said, like, these events happened while you said I had no brain activity. And they weren't events that they could have just heard. Yeah, I'm trying to think of an example, and I was like, someone walked in with a blue coat. They cannot have heard that they walked in with a blue coat.
Right.
This is an example. I don't have a solid one lined up yet. I'm working on that.
Well, chances are you're in a hospital. Chances are you're in a rough condition.
Yeah.
Chances are the people around you are wearing blue coats.
White coats, but
Usually
yeah.
white, especially if you're dying.
A lot of scrubs are blue.
Yeah.
Not a coat though. Like I'm saying, like someone like wearing an actual coat. Like they just
Well, some of the stories that I
getting into the
don't.
particular. Yeah.
Right, I don't have sources on this because it's been a while since I've read it, but I remember reading accounts where the person who had gone brain dead for I think at least 3 minutes were able to tell the doctors who were in the room what they were doing at any given time and some of the things that they said. So, giving them the benefit of the doubt that these stories were true, from whatever source it was that I remember reading that, that's strange.
Yeah, the other thing that I'd like to point out about EKGs, they're very useful devices, but they are fairly low bandwidth when it comes to analyzing the brain. You've got the skull is actually pretty hard to get through when you're trying to pick up electrical signals, which is why you've really only got I think 5 feeds on an EKG, alpha, beta, gamma, delta waves.
Right.
That's 4. If these things happened while someone was undergoing an fMRI while dying, I'd put a lot more credence into it. Even then, an fMRI isn't exactly that high definition, but it's still better than an EKG.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
Or even if their skull was open and they had one of those, I think it's a different type of EKG, but it actually applies directly on the brain.
It's like little paddles.
Yeah, it only studies a very small portion of the brain, but it's much higher definition. But it's also super invasive.
Yeah.
So, I mean, maybe we can, and I this crosses an ethical guideline, line, and I know it. But could we start hooking like death row inmates up with these things and studying what's going on in their head?
Hey,
Or how about just like
Outsource
old
that to
people
China.
who are dying and want their body to be donated to science?
Well, we can have it
Like-
donated real quick.
Oh, there are
Well, I mean,
probably
like
death
they
row
are
inmates that would-
actively dying, and like
Oh,
we
wow.
know they're about to die soon. So like, how about you die with your skull cut off, so we can study this.
I mean,
If you're
that sounds pretty
interested,
cool.
let your local morgue office know.
I'd be like,
Your local neurologist.
I was
morgue,
kidding.
neurologist.
Obviously, it's not a morgue office. Like,
the lunch lady.
I'd be like, look, if you're going to do that,
bold.
then at my funeral, the photograph that you have to use on top of my casket is the one of me with my, like, half my skull gone. I want people to remember me as I died.
Ooh.
Let's see where we're at on the timer here. We're probably
Maybe.
getting pretty close. Yeah, we're at about over half hour. So, all right, we're going to go ahead and jump to a sponsor. We're going to hear a little bit from our sponsors, and when we come back, we're going to talk about something. I haven't figured it out yet, but we're going to keep talking.
Woo!
Promise.
Yay.
Computers are powerful tools that make modern life not only easy, but possible. Anyone who has struggled with a fickle laptop knows that they seem to have a spirit of their own. This is true. No one knows this better than IndigiTechnologies. When other tech support settles, our CompuShamans Shamans persevere. Through VR vision quests and performing all our repairs in sweat lodges, we call upon the myriad spirits of a computer's parts to restore balance to the whole system. IndigiTechnologies. Great service from the Great Spirit.
And we're back. Okay, so I think I've decided that what we're going to do is, since we're all kind of more on the materialist end of things, maybe we'll explore idealism a little bit further and present an interesting argument in favor of idealism and see where that takes us.
And
So-
you had one.
Yeah. This is what I've got so far. So it's a little bit of a block of text, but it's important to get this stuff in. So the veracity of our experience of reality is only validated by our consistent intercommunication of qualia. Science is a conversation about consistent and predictable experiences between humans as they occur in reality, right? So if our experiences vary too widely, we generally consider that experience a matter of subjectivity. But if our experiences align, we consider it functionally objective. And we utilize that information to predict the future behavior of our environment. And of each other as subjects of each other's experience as well. But it still comes down to qualia. So this means that even science is bounded by human perception and therefore bounded by an idealistic lens, the lens of human observational faculties. So what that kind of boils down to is that science even is dependent on intercommunication of consistent qualia. That's the only reason that's the only way that we can conceive of it as working, is that our qualia is consistent between each other and we can communicate that and then replicate it. So now we're talking about idealism here, not solipsism. This works for idealism, and I don't think about it more. Maybe not for solipsism.
Not so much for
Kind
solipsism.
of like time is only a thing because we all agree it's a thing.
Something like that. That's definitely more on the idealistic lens.
More like money than time, but
Yeah,
I
that's
mean, yeah,
probably
money
better.
is definitely the better one, and it was just the first one.
Fire hot.
But we're not even with this. We're not even dealing with strictly conceptual things like money or things that we're just applying a value to. We're talking about the literal
Yes.
material world. We only understand it in terms of our collective, like all the individual perceptions of it, and how consistent those experiences are. The consistency is what matters with science, right? We have to be able to replicate it.
So it's material, but also a concept. A forest.
well, ideally.
Oh, well, everything is a material and a concept. Everything. That's actually that goes back to Plato's whole thing of the world of the world of matter and the world of forms.
Yeah.
I don't want to dive too deep into that because that's a little bit off to the side.
Ideally, science is about replicability,
And those dudes in a cave.
or has a replicability element to it. But pop science is really bad about it.
Pop science?
Yes,
Okay.
pop science, where a paper will come out talking about, how many false positives have we had of, it's frickin' aliens, like Tabby Star. If for those of you who may or may not know about Tabby Star, I'm going to try and paraphrase this. We found a star that had massive dimming over an unpredictable or over a odd period.
Oh, okay.
So people were thinking, it can't be a planet. Those are far more predictable. And my God, 20% of the light's being blocked out. That's like 1/5 of the surface. So we can't. No immediate idea came up. So a lot of people jumped on it. It's an alien superstructure being built around this star. Okay. It's never aliens. Until it is. And when we decide it's aliens, you better fucking believe they've landed.
Unless you're on ancient aliens, then it's always.
Or they've revealed to be the Queen of England the entire time.
We can do an entire episode on ancient aliens.
Oh,
I will go off like a...
with you there. I'm with you there. I've had enough.
If you
I will go off like the lightning or the thunder of the gods.
if you watch it long enough, you can see that the hosts or one of the experts' hair is just
Goes
just
up
gets
and up
bigger,
and up
yeah.
and up. Yeah, it
He's
gets higher as he
slowly-
gets crazy.
Well, he's slowly
Yes.
being abducted.
yes,
Yeah.
it's the slowest abduction in history.
They're abducting his hair first.
They're using
Since
they're
we
using the
start
economy
losing so
version
much
of the
Like
tractor
hair
beam.
is
He has
escaping
that.
from his head.
Yes.
Okay, off topic.
Okay, sorry.
So how do we deal with that problem?
I mean, there's something to be said for it. And it is really just summed up by that often overused phrase. It's become a cliche at this point of perception is reality.
Right.
We're limited by our perceptions, so we can only perceive reality as we perceive it. And at that point, there is no objective reality because no one's perceptions are 100% aligned with someone else's.
Oh, let me ask you this. Oh, go ahead. You first.
I was just gonna say, so kind of like my reality is my own. We could both experience the same thing, but we're going to come away with it saying different things because of just all of our experiences that we've had before that one.
Even if it was just I was in this chair, he was in this chair.
Right.
Just by
It's
those
the context.
Just by those very slight differences, people are going to draw different conclusions from the same stimulus.
They bring different context to that situation.
Yeah, and on top of that, you've also got human perception is notoriously unreliable.
Even direct. Even when you're standing there watching the same thing.
Right. That's why if you're going to ask a bunch of people about a particular event, you don't let them talk to each other. Mm-hmm. Because one of our good friends, Forsyth, was a witness to an accident. Someone pulled through a red light and T-boned. Well, he saw it, so stick around. And no one saw a cell phone in this guy's hand until one guy said, he might have been on his cell phone, which is why I was distracted. And you're right, I saw a cell phone. And then suddenly everyone saw a cell phone there.
Yeah.
What? It's almost, this kind of thing can spread. It's like a mimetic virus that can spread. And then the human capacity for self-delusion, just about one's own self, is staggering.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We all tell ourselves tiny little lies about ourselves every day.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I know in like police investigations that's a known phenomena where I keep saying that phenomenon. There is an N at the end of that word.
There is.
Well, it's plural or singular.
Yeah. Well, is that when ideas get implanted? That's what magicians do, right? Like they plant ideas in your head a lot of times in ways you don't notice. Mm-hmm. Like, oh yeah, I guess I was thinking of that number. Holy shit! Like, how did you know that? Well, because I made you think that because I used the way that our brain works to my advantage. And that is when you get into the argument is it the way our brain works, or am I taking control of the way our minds are all working together?
Another example is practice similar to magicians that's just called mind penetration. Essentially, there's this one video of this practice that I've seen where a man walks into a jewelry store. He's dressed like he's going to make a purchase, and he says he's going to pay in cash. So, he pulls out a wad of what looks like bills. However, he puts down the first one and starts distracting the person counting it as he's counting it. He's asking these questions that are kind of distracting his brain, but he expects to see that money. And he unwittingly gives this guy a diamond ring for a single $100 bill. Now, this was recorded in a show, so, well, he got the ring back and probably felt very foolish afterwards. But it shows that human perception can be manipulated extremely easily. Mm-hmm. I mean, hell, that's not
I wouldn't say that's easy, but it can be manipulated surprisingly.
It's surprisingly influenceable.
Yes, surprisingly influenceable.
That's not a word, right?
I don't think that's a word.
There's a word.
Influential?
Thank you.
There you go.
Make up words. It's what I do.
Surprisingly
Hi.
influential.
Oh, is that the show?
Don't even need drugs for it.
No, influential is, has influence.
There's certain drugs that make you more so, but yeah, I mean, you don't have to be drugged for it.
Jello pudding, that's one of them.
Brain matters, maybe?
Yes.
Oh.
Most food, really.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, you mentioned Jello pudding. And
The thing I was going to bring up in favor of idealism as being a something you at the very least should not ignore as a force in reality is kind of twofold. First, we interact with the world at the level of ideas.
Yeah, we can't experience the world any other way. We experience the world idealistically, even if it is materialistic.
Well, it's like, I know a cell phone when I see one. Yes, I have one, but that cell phone's not the same as mine. I know what a cell phone is. I can put that together and identify it because, well, it's not a tuba. Don't you fucking say it.
say what?
I knew exactly what I said.
I don't even like Garrett, but I love to.
God damn it!
I love.
You had to say it. You had to fucking say it.
The D-bag.
Anyway,
All right.
The other side of that is we don't just have ideas about physical things. We have ideas about abstract things that don't really exist.
Mercy.
Governments. That is an abstract idea. The people in government have power because we kind of let them have it. The concept of idealism in the political sense, ideologies. These are
Functional illusions.
yeah, money, as we mentioned
Peace.
earlier.
Yeah, the concept of hey, it's different to everyone, and it's an abstract idea. And it's like, what is it?
Well, it's
I
different
mean,
things to different people, but
exactly.
Yeah,
I would argue
Right,
that
that's a whole
peace
different
is
show.
not being at war.
I mean, with yourself, with like my best friend. On the whole, I guess that's what I'm saying. It's also an abstract idea.
And scalable.
A scale. It's a scale of the lack of a threat of physical or psychological harm.
I would
Like
say
that's the way I tend to look at peace.
Oh, God.
Justice and mercy.
I don't like that we have to specify psychological harm.
To an extent, there's. I mean, you've been in the army. You
I
understand
know.
how that can work.
I was going to say
Yeah.
I don't like that we can defy war that way, but I can't find a good argument against it either.
Right.
So it just
It's where you draw the
lack
lines.
of harm,
Right.
threat of harm. You don't need to specify any other kind.
I do have a question, and I'm not sure if it goes in this segment or not, but Roach had one that was interesting to me. So, I'm a little bit of a bleeding heart. I know I have a fairly open mind. I was like, I can't deny more or less anything. I can say I'm 99% sure this doesn't exist, but keep that 1% open. It's just how I am. So,
Keep an
I was
open mind, but
thinking
not so
that-
open it falls out.
exactly. So I'm saying, like, with pure materialism, they're saying, like, a brain exists, that's how we think. So,
Okay.
animals. Why do we think in materialism? Like, would materialism say, like, there's a big possibility that animals also have these thoughts, we just don't know it?
The animals also think as we do, but
Yeah,
we don't access it. We can't access it because
We don't know how they, like, because we can't measure abstract thought.
Right.
So how do we know they don't have it?
The best we can do is look at their behavior. That's it. That's all we've got.
I mean, there's a lot of
And
animals
brain activity,
that
I mean,
have behaviors that
Right.
are similar to ours. They may not build structures, but
Beavers
Some
do.
of them do.
well, yeah,
Yeah.
yes, and some of them do build structures. It's like we all think of animals as lower thinking, but like with materialism, when I was reading it, I was thinking that they should be all for. Animals would also maybe be on our level.
Well, materialistically,
was
yeah. I mean, materialistically, if you're gonna try to ask and answer that question, you all you could really do is look at their behavior and their whatever their brain, whatever you can measure of their brain activity. So we do the best that we can. I think in that we do that with animals. That's how we know certain animals, like we were talking about during our contentious session last time, that some animals seem to have. I'm going to say a higher IQ because it's kind of what it boils down to.
Higher IQ?
Yeah, their ability to, because in order for being able to analyze patterns, right, and that's what
Higher
language is,
cognitive function.
right?
yes.
But by IQ tends to be, as far as I'm to understand, tends to be based on the ability to recognize patterns and then predict futures of those patterns. That seems to be what IQ is based on.
There's also a heavy memory element to it.
Oh well, yeah. I mean, that's just being able to
It's more than just pattern recognition, but that is part of it. It's a sizable part of it, but there's also different kinds of patterns. Spatial recognition and reasoning.
Right. That's why I'm
Yeah,
including all that because there's so much involved in pattern recognition.
I think it's fair to point out that IQ is not just pattern recognition.
Yeah.
And I guess that was like a big question. I was just like, I think that like in ideology, I would understand how they'd be like, well, humans don't think on the same level. We do because we are here. We are on this plane.
You mean animals?
Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, some
I
humans
misspoke.
don't think on the same level.
That
We've
is
definitely seen that.
very true. So animals don't think on the same plane as us because we are here because of this realm our minds are on collectively.
Right. When we look
Where
at
as
what
far as materialism, I was wondering what the argument might be.
I mean, as a materialist, I would think the argument is, well, look at the types of structures they're able to build and how complex are those structures. It's like, okay, well, they can't build a social structure as complex as ours. Some get surprisingly and impressively close, but not the same.
What is to say that doesn't mean they don't have abstract thought? Like, I'm saying we don't have a way to measure it.
Oh, it's specifically
so why
abstract.
is it like? Why do they say that it doesn't exist? We can't measure it. So
Right.
in theory, if we can't measure it, we can't say 100% it doesn't exist.
I mean, there's an argument for the idea that animals might be capable of abstract thought, but not have as much use for it as we do because, for whatever reason, they're surviving perfectly fine, right? And they're
Or
not
they
bothered by
just
things
don't
that humans
feel
are bothered
the
by.
need to
Right.
do the things we do.
I think
Right.
it would be wicked if some termites got together and built a sabotage rocket. Okay.
Well-
I mean, if you think about it, they could get in. They could make such good binding. I mean, you would not have to worry about O-rings, right? This thing's not blowing up on the platform because the level of craftsmanship. It's like that ad in the in Crazy People. Why are the Japanese so good at making electronics? Because Caucasians are too damn tall. Right? They can get right up on those.
Oh my
Well,
god.
something that
Apologize
popped
for
into my head.
everyone there.
Something that popped into my head in regards to the complex structures comment. Bees. Think of how complicated just the hexagons.
Here we go.
The hexagons and the science of it. The hexagon, for the purpose they have, the hexagon is the perfect shape.
Yeah.
It has remarkable durability. It is ideal for storing materials, especially liquids. But how large is a bee's brain? It's not even a brain, it's a nerve stab.
Well, yeah, because the question
It's
is,
a nerve cluster.
do they know what they're doing, or is it sort of ingrained?
And
Is it innate?
that's the materialist approach to animals.
Right.
With you social critters, it's a little bit of both.
But I would say insects are pretty much the only animal that pretty much exists entirely in material. They don't really have enough brain to think.
Right. So the question we're dealing with, as we've
Yeah,
dealt with before, is there an element of sapience to their actions? And I from a human perspective of materialism, we don't seem to think that there necessarily is. At least not to the level that a human would think, okay, the hexagon is going to be best for this particular, and then be able to reason through it, right?
Well, I mean, what makes human reasoning, what makes our brains so neat, isn't like trial and error, or even necessarily abstract thought in the way we typically think about it, but simulation. That's what humans are good at. We don't try something out and then keep trying it till it actually ends up working. No, we're thinking, okay, if I do this, then this.
Right.
And then you try it, okay, why didn't that work? You analyze why it failed, and you come up with other simulations. That's what the human brain is good at.
Yeah.
In order to do that, you need to be good at pattern recognition.
Right. Because you have to completely fabricate the situation without having
Exactly.
to practice it.
It's like everyone's created these crazy hypothetical scenarios, like, what am I going to do if this happens?
Mm-hmm.
And in your head, it always works out.
That's not true.
I'm gonna go up and say hi. You know, it's like, and you always in the movies they always have the person practicing in the mirror how they're coming. Hi, how are you? No, that's just wrong. And like it's like they're
Yeah.
practicing that without any, and yeah.
That movie can get you out of those clothes and into a dry martini. You want to get some martini?
Yeah, but
A little off
it's
topic,
simulation.
Right.
I think that's a big part of the human experience, and bringing it back to idealism.
Simulation.
No, because humans operate from the perspective of internal simulation before manifesting it in the world, at least when actively thinking about something. I mean, people do accidental shit all the time.
Yeah.
You can't have a material science. You can't have science without that ability to simulate and hypothesize.
Yeah.
Which a hypothesis could be considered an untested simulation.
Right.
If you frame it in that way.
Well, because a tested simulation is an experiment. Right?
Well, the experiment is testing simulation.
Right.
If it ends up works, then you have a positive result, and if everyone else comes up with it, well, then now you have a theory.
Mm-hmm.
And weirdly, in my brain, like the argument that other animals don't have this abstract thought is the biggest argument for ideology.
Idealism.
I can't speak today. I apologize to everyone.
It's okay. You've got people to help you.
It is the biggest argument for it.
Mm.
More than anything else, for the way my own brain works.
Mm-hmm.
Can you show me on the brain where the day touched you?
All of it.
Well, first time it's true.
Yeah, that just weirdly that really helped me conceptualize the idea part of idealism. Idea.
Yeah.
You're right. Idealism.
I did.
You got it right.
Yeah, and the other thing that I find interesting about this, materialism versus idealism concept is it goes way back, and at least in my opinion, it's more or less been solved by one of my favorite philosophers, Immanuel Kant, in his critique of pure reason, where he's saying, all right, rationalism was kind of the idealism of its day. Empiricism is the materialism of its day. They're both, you can't engage in one without the other.
Mm-hmm.
In order to experiment and get your empirical data, you need to have some rational thought, some rationality going on there, pure rationality. But in order to interpret the results of your data, from the empirical, you also need to have that. But you can't create anything more without new hard data.
You need stimuli in order to create something new, and the question is, where does that stimuli come from?
Yeah, so materialism is not empiricism, and idealism is not rationality, but I see parallels there.
Right.
You glared daggers at me, and I wonder why, Dave.
That was just my face.
Hard.
I was thinking.
Well, your face looked like it was like, you're getting ahead of me!
No, well, actually, you know what?
Just saying my
Apparently
words.
something came out a little bit that I didn't intend it to, because, yeah, there is a little bit in the conclusion stuff that I wrote up for this that kind of goes along those lines. But we're not there yet. I did want to bring
Spoilers.
I did want to bring up something, because we've talked about solipsism as being on the extreme end of idealism. There is an extreme end of materialism, and I like this term better. Vulgar materialism.
Oh.
Ooh.
It's not as exciting as
I like vulva materialism.
So vulgar materialism is really, really simple. Basically, all it is it's the idea that there is nothing beyond matter. So I would say your Gnostic atheists most certainly tend to fall into that camp, right? So there's nothing beyond matter. Thought is explained entirely by physical phenomena, and nothing exists outside of the material reality. So that's vulgar materialism. There's no gray area here. Everything is built of something tangible, something, well, for lack of better words, tangible.
Yeah. I find those people insufferable.
Well, why? Let's talk about that, because it's easier for us to talk about the problems with idealism.
So it's like
I kind of agree with that.
that kind of reminds me of it's probably apocryphal, but an anecdote of Rene Descartes, who had a dream about an angel coming down to him and saying something along the lines of, nature is to be tamed by number and measure. Mm-hmm. It's like that. Yeah, kinda.
There's definitely an idealistic bent to that.
Yeah, but it's an ideal that pushes materialism.
Yeah, well, I think what's funny about that is it actually does fall pretty much in line with what I was talking about earlier, as far as my sort of view of things, which is that there is a material reality that we're handed, that we're given, and then the idealistic bent of that is that we, for lack of better words, to go with the Cartesian thing that you just talked about, is that we sort of, in a way, I suppose, tame it. And really, I think what's probably a better word than that is that we learn to understand it so that we can manipulate it to our own ends.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I guess that is a way of taming something, but there's something about that word that just kind of strikes me wrong. Because we're not really taming it. It could take us out whenever it wanted to, if it wanted to. We still don't really hold up.
If it has once.
Right. We still don't really hold up that well to the pure power of nature, right? As far along
We've
as
gotten
we
a
are.
lot better at it.
Oh, yeah. But, yeah, that to me, that feels pretty Cartesian.
The
that
damn
idea.
government can, fund the dikes around.
I'm sorry, fund the what?
Dikes.
Okay.
The things that there's a lot of them in Holland.
I'm sure there are. That is neither here nor there, Garrett.
I guess bring it back around here. My arguments against the pure materialism.
Say vulgar materialism because it's cool.
Vulgar.
Vulgar materialism would be is like, I feel like we've all, I won't say all. A lot of people have had experiences that they cannot explain.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think can be explained by saying it's all material. And I know personally, I've had an experience that it doesn't matter who tries to explain it with science. Like, it is what it is. Like, it was shortly after my grandmother died. My grandmother spent a lot of time raising me, and I was having a hard time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the only dream I have ever remembered. And I knew immediately it wasn't a dream.
Mm.
I did wake up from it, but me and her had a conversation, and she related to me about how, she believed in me, and she knew I was going to do well for myself. Even if I didn't accomplish everything I wanted to, she was going to be proud of me.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the first time since she had died when I woke up that I had felt at peace.
Right.
And again, it's the only dream I have ever really remembered.
Mm-hmm.
It's been over 10 years and I still remember this dream. I don't care who tries to explain it away. For me, the vulgar materialism will never work out because I've had that experience.
Mm.
I do believe you called it the vulvar material.
I said vulgar this time, maybe.
The vulva material.
Yes.
You know what? The recording will tell me if I ever listen to it.
It is documented. Well, on that topic, even what I would wager is probably the most materialistic person here, which would be Garrett. Even Garrett's had experiences like that. I think about I think it was a dream that you had about your nieces.
No, that was not a dream.
I thought that was a dream.
No, that was not a dream. I was driving.
Oh.
And I was driving home from Fort Knox to Indianapolis in the middle of a fucking snowstorm.
Mm.
And, I mean, the wind got really damn rough. Like, I couldn't keep the car on I had to go in the middle, and I was still fighting to keep it on the road. And then once it kind of cleared up a little bit, I got a call on my cell phone from my uncle, where my goddaughters were screaming at a demon to leave their Uncle Garrett alone.
Mm.
It's like, are you okay? He's like, yeah, I had some rough weather. Okay, well, here's what happened. It's like, all right, that's crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, I've had some experiences I can't explain.
Right.
Yeah. There's an old saying: you never find an atheist in a foxhole. Well, having been in one, I'm not going to say that the entirety of the universe or the entirety of reality can be explained purely from a scientific standpoint.
Right.
Humans are too complex for that.
And along those lines, I don't even think you really need to... see, when I think about vulgar materialism, as far as what doesn't make sense to me, is that it seems absurd to imagine that all of the natural universe, whatever it may be, and however large it may be, and whatever may constitute it, and whatever might spawn from it, it's absurd for me to imagine, for me to think that anybody could possibly think that the only things that can exist are the things that we have access to, in some form or another. That seems crazy to me. The idea of that
Well,
seems
that we
absolutely
can.
insane.
Made up of things that we can ever have access to.
Yes.
Is a better way to phrase
Right.
that.
I think it is absolutely reasonable to believe that there are things that constitute the universe, that are within the universe, or within reality even. I consider that a bigger thing than the universe.
Mm-hmm.
There are things that we just do not have access to. Our faculties we're not built for it.
I think that's a bit pessimistic on that one. I think that there are things that we do and may one day have more access to or have access to at all. I think we will have access to pretty much everything. But those things, well, to everything, remove the pretty much.
Okay.
But those things cannot, some things we will not be able to have access to from a scientific standpoint. You could not, they're not something that you can weigh and measure, is a better way to put it.
You have to touch it with your mind versus your hands.
Well, we do that with things now already.
Yeah.
I mean, we had an episode on Neuralink.
Waggling her eyebrows.
My eyebrows, like, haha. I don't know why I thought it was
if
funny.
I can get a word in.
Yeah, go ahead. You
I don't
actually
know
haven't
how
spoken
those other things will
Yeah.
be accessed, but I'm not pessimistic enough to say that we'll never have access to them.
Right. It doesn't seem pessimistic to me, but let's hear what Nick's got.
Well, I actually have a particular distaste for the vulgar materialists, despite being rather materialistic myself. It's the fact that they're usually the Gnostic atheists, the obnoxious fedora tipping variety. The variety who, they're being enlightened by their own intellect as opposed to by some mental illness they labeled a religion. Mm-hmm. It leads to a kind of
Arrogance, for one.
yes, arrogance, the kind of thing where somebody needs to feel special and not part of a herd just because they have this narcissistic drive to be different and somehow superior.
I know something you don't know.
Exactly. It's the same thing for
So do I, boy.
the same thing for a lot of conspiracy theorists.
I was actually thinking that
I
too.
mean, again, they're coming to a Gnostic, a Gnostic conclusion to which they don't have all the evidence.
Yeah, that's the arrogance right there. It's
Yeah.
the Gnosticism. Because you can be an agnostic atheist, and I think, even as a Christian, I think that's perfectly reasonable. I can very easily see how somebody would come to that conclusion.
God could be a potato.
Harry Thunderer, Cosmic Muffin, wherever.
An agnostic atheist.
I mean, who knows? Maybe
Well, an agnostic atheist would be somebody... Because, Gnosticism has to do with whether or not you feel like you have absolute knowledge of a particular thing.
Correct.
So, a Gnostic atheist would be somebody who says that they know that there's no God, they have
Okay.
proof that there is no God. An agnostic
Okay,
atheist would be...
and like,
where most
when we talked
atheists
about it
fall.
earlier was that like the atheist version of the vulgar materialism. So I
Yeah,
understood.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
And idealism isn't necessarily spiritualism.
No.
yeah.
And it's not necessarily
There are many
religious thinking.
Right, there
either.
are many atheistic philosophical idealists in
You can have
philosophy.
perfectly rational idealist thought
Yeah.
without any divine influence to it.
that sounds like an interesting read.
Actually, I think we could bring that up after the break. The idea of simulation theory, that really material is a realm of ideas. We just don't have the codes to access it.
Yeah, that's kind of along the lines of what I was talking about. And I don't feel that that's pessimistic. And this is where you and I differ quite a bit, Garrett, is that because you're such a humanist, a lot of the way that you frame whether something is good or not is framed in terms of whether or not it's good for people. And I don't feel like thinking.
I
that,
make no apologies for being an anthropocentrist.
Oh no, I know you don't.
Well,
But I don't see it as pessimistic to say that there are things that humans aren't capable of or that humans don't have access to.
It makes sense. The Borg have been trying to, assimilate humans for years.
We will get them.
Yes, the ancients.
Did you have a thing?
Oh, I was just looking at the. I guess like my biggest takeaway is still, obviously we have one more segment, but it was like it's pulled off. So this is an idealist only has to believe reality to be a fundamentally mental in nature, and that for me is almost kind of a conflicting thought because I believe that matter is real, but I also know that how this table feels to me, the reality of what this table feels like to me, could mean something different to Garrett. So that statement muddles my brain more. Every time I think I have a grasp.
You're talking about the hard problem of consciousness. You're talking about qualia. That's exactly what you're dealing with. It's like you have an experience of the table that Garrett has a different experience of. That's what qualia is. That's the hard problem of consciousness.
I remember talking to someone when I was a kid, a teenager. What if what I perceive to be the color blue is different from what you perceive?
That's a really
the
common
color
thought experiment.
blue to be. I blew their mind and they stopped talking to me. But,
It also goes beyond qualia, at least when it comes to this table. This is my table. I've had a lot of good experiences with this table. Had some bad experiences with this table. But I like this table frequently.
Did you wash it afterwards? I've eaten off of this table.
I've eaten off
this
table
table.
too.
It's like, this table can be measured. I believe that if I had never met this table or thought of this table, it would still be a table. But, like, when I feel the texture of this table, it becomes a new reality for my mind. And I can't say that is wrong.
Right.
So I feel like that pulls closer to our idealism. So, yeah, that's all I have.
Okay.
All my brain
I
thoughts.
think it's time for a break.
Probably about time for a break. Yeah, what's hard with this particular subject is figuring out where the boundaries are of the subject that we're talking about versus all the other places you can go with it.
That's almost.
Now we're doing this.
That's an extra long one.
Oh, yeah, well, it's okay.
We had a 42 minutes.
Oh, yeah.
Last session.
Right.
So, this ain't shit.
All right, so this is, we're going to go and hear another word from our sponsors. And when we come back, we'll talk about some more stuff.
Yeah,
And,
you cons.
And just so you know, our next sponsor has their own page on Rule 34.
As you can imagine, exsanguination is a terrible way to die. Even worse is to find out that someone you knew and trusted drains you because they are a vampire. To curb the rise in vampire-related bleedouts, OFF has released sferatu. This injected mixture of garlic extract, holy water, and microscopic crucifixes will make your blood not only unpalatable, but lethal to the undead. Sferatu only needs to be injected every 4 hours to remain effective in keeping your blood where it belongs. You made your blood. Sferatu keeps it yours.
All right, and we're back. So to usher in the conclusion of this, what we're trying to do is, I'm going to do something I try not to do, but I can't think of any other way to do it, which is to offer a bit of a monologue on what I think the situation is, and then we kind of dive into it. Because I think we're all sort of in the same situation where we have varying understanding that it is both material and idealistic. So I'm gonna give you the little monologue on my thoughts on this, and then we'll sort of go around and see what we think of that and where we might differ on those particular points. Okay. So my particular conclusion is that reality is both idealistic and material, right? I just mentioned that. So the material has to exist in some sense in order to be experienced, right? But in order to be experienced, the material has to simultaneously exist as a concept. That's the only way that we're able to think about things, right? Experience them. So maybe the case that the mistake is in presuming that these two ideas are mutually exclusive. It seems likely that an object, by way of being an idea, is also manifested simultaneously as material, right? So it does, when it comes into existence, it becomes both of those things at the same time. But the relationship between the ideal and the material seems chiasmic Now that I pronounced that correctly. So they are the same state, but from different perspectives, which is how you get material and ideal. They overlap interdependently. They come into being simultaneously and diverge as a matter of a point of observation. So the material object is the noumenal object. So we've talked in other podcasts about Kant's noumenal versus phenomenal world, right? It's the same thing as Plato's world of matter and world of idea, or world of
Forms.
Thank you. So, yeah, the material object is the noumenal object. That is the object that exists in itself, independent of outside observation, which would define it based on the observer's qualia. So you have the ideal object, then, is the phenomenal object. It's the object as defined by the qualia of the observer. So the object exists in both states, relating to itself and outside observers simultaneously. So the question would be which state can be validated as the more true, which is what the whole podcast episode's been based on. So here's where I start thinking about that. So if we define something as being true based on, we'll say this. Well, if we define true as something which is objectively consistent, independent of perspective, as in the object's total existence in itself, being independent of possible falsehoods about it, then it seems clear that the truer state of existence is the noumenal existence, and therefore the material existence. So that's the argument that the most true thing is the material version of whatever that thing is.
Okay.
But it gets tricky. So the material object then is defined by its existence in reference to an observer, such as a human. I'm sorry, let's say that. Let me rephrase that. So the material object then isn't defined by its existence in reference to an observer such as a human, but rather it's defined by its existence independent of an observer. So this existence constitutes its most true manifestation, right? Whatever it is in and of itself without any other observation of it. So that's what the object is. But again, this is where it gets kind of tricky and how I think that chiasmic relationship becomes a little bit, at least somewhat clearer. So I'm almost done, I promise. An object is imbued with meaning by the way of being differentiated from another object. So we're going back to the whole thing that you hate talking about with Derrida. So the object has a spirit, so to speak, offered to it by whatever force manifested it as a thing separate from other things. That's what defines the spirit of that thing. It's the meaning of it, right? So even inanimate objects have meaning independent of human observation or dictation, right? So in this, I have this bolded. The meaning of an object is its ideal manifestation, its existence as an idea. Right, that's the spirit of it. That's the essence of it. That's the meaning that sort of comes out of it as by virtue of it being a thing different from other things. So it's the object in and of itself, because meaning is synonymous with definition. Meaning is the significance, and the significance of the object is that it is not any other object. Therefore, since the ideal state of an object is the self-evident meaning endowed by its manifesting parent, so whatever thing created it, whatever that force was, which differentiated it from all other objects, then the object's most true existence is its ideal state, or the thing as an idea. The idea is the meaning endowed to it. That's all I've got.
Well, fuck.
There is a lot to digest.
Well,
I wanted to offer something that blended the two so we can move that direction.
I tried not to glaze over, but there were times where it's just, okay, Dave is I'm going to let him run.
I just feel that in order to preserve the human species in the face of the collective, we need a Derrida counter.
All right, add it to the notebook.
While I attempted to follow that, I am not the most well-spoken person, obviously, as this podcast will show.
I had plenty of time to format this, and
you still fucked it up.
I think I got the gist of it. Could I first say, though, that when you first said numerical, the way it's spelled was not even... it has like 15 more letters than I expected.
Noumenal, yeah.
Thank you, yes.
Nominal.
I mean, like, there's so many letters in that word, and I just thought it was like number with an AL at the end. So I did want to make that statement. Because then I saw how it was spelled. I was like, oh, I was wrong. It's like if this cup that I am holding that you listeners cannot see.
It's black.
It is seemingly an ordinary cup. You now have your own idea of what this cup is.
Mm.
If you're in this room, you have a different idea of what this cup is. But I am pretending right now that I have my own personal experience with this cup. That I have a completely different view of what
Oh, no,
this
you're
cup
not the only one
now
that's had that
means.
experience with that cup.
I am pretending. Did you not hear the word pretend? I am pretending
We're moving the
that
venue.
this cup has a significance that is known only to me. So this is, in theory, a cup that is made up of a certain amount of atoms, and it weighs this much. That is empirical information that we can put down. But to me, that cannot define all that this cup is.
It's not the whole thing for you.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, right.
So I think that for me, just the fact that you can measure it doesn't even remotely touch what it truly is. Therefore, the idealism version of it would take precedence over the materialism.
Because there's meaning attached
Exactly.
to it, right?
Well-
Like the meaning.
There's also the fact that no matter how well you describe it to to our lovely listeners, their mind will probably not come up with the same image of a cup, regardless of how descriptive it is.
Right.
I mean, you can try to get the shape, but that their brain might not quite get the right curves.
No, there is a way we could give them a perfectly accurate description of what that cup is. If we had some calipers, the time, and the will.
I thought you were going to go all Oprah on this.
But-
Like, and you get a cup, and you get a cup. We'll just mail them out.
I mean,
Uh,
no, because those
That's
those
not a
would be
description.
different
But
cups.
that's
But not the feeling I have about this cup. You know, they.
The feeling you have about this cup is
exact-
Frangelico.
We could take a picture of this cup and show every little tiny mark that it accompanies it, with things next to it for reference. But my meaning of it can never be distributed to anyone else. I could try to communicate it, but words will not do that feeling justice because they never do.
You know, it could help you with that.
Having words that make sense.
I was going to say, if you had a brain computer interface to broadcast your meaning to them.
That maybe would make more sense, but maybe not.
Borg is
We've
trying.
been through this. I was going to say that because you could use descriptors and all those types of things, but honestly, I think what would be the difference between your experience of that cup and anybody else's is that your hands are shaped differently, your mouth is shaped differently.
Yeah.
When you drink out of it, it feels different than if somebody else were to drink out of it because your mouth is shaped a certain way.
I was like, this cup is my perfect cup. Because
How the liquid goes
it's
down will be different.
me.
Yeah.
I mean,
What I was going to go with as far as giving people a perfect as possible representation of the cup itself. We could give every single stat on that thing,
Oh, yeah.
You
And-
could.
but it wouldn't be the cup as she experiences it.
No.
Which gets into, again, one of my favorite words to say, qualia.
well, there's
Qualia.
there's something I experienced rather intensely lately.
Vomiting?
I don't think that's just lately.
No, I
Go
didn't.
on.
It's awesome, yeah.
Well, I won't tell you how I. No.
Go on.
Speak up or lean in toward the phone.
So, I am a bit of a fan of spicy food. I really like hot peppers and hot pepper sauces. Now, if anyone who is listening has similar experiences, you realize how much it becomes a very subjective experience as you try more and eat more of it. You develop a tolerance that is yours and yours alone. For example, you may start out on green peppers and feel they're very spicy. Or you could have started out with jalapenos and it kind of burns a little. Or you could be me and habaneros are just regular. And now I've moved on to Carolina Reapers. And I do not look forward to the future of my bunghole.
Where were you going with this, Nick?
It's his experience with
Okay.
and
certain
my own
peppers.
and
I think
my
it
own,
started that way, and then it just became like a.
and my own biology will
I've
be
seen things.
Can we edit that?
Going away from the
That's staying.
going away from the
bunghole.
subjective
Oh, yeah.
aspects of idealism, and I think kind of touching on what Dave was talking about, is there is a subject or an objective idealism.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, there's a solipsistic quality to that. But what specifically do you mean by that?
Well, going back to the idea of the cup, at some level, everyone has the same concept of a cup.
Right.
It might look a bit different, but at its very essence, an ideal cup holds water. If nothing else, an ideal cup holds a liquid.
Right.
Preferably well. But in a pinch, like,
Spring,
I would
drinking.
still call, like, if I am desperate, my hand could be a cup.
Yep.
If I'm desperate. And so, yeah, cup holds liquid. I think we could all
More of
agree
a
with that.
bowl.
Yeah.
I prefer mine with a valve on the end for butt chugging.
We call it the bunghole. I want credit for that.
Okay.
The whole of
So yeah, you say, I'm holding a black cup,
So-
and we could all have different thoughts, but like all
Each
of our
one
thoughts
of our thoughts
think,
will be a cup.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
So there is an objective measure to idealism in some way.
I
like my peppers
Which
and pain food.
goes to the realm of forms.
Well, here's the question, because what you got to is the objective version of idealism is based entirely on meaning,
Mhm.
right? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did I?
No, that wasn't like that wasn't me like you said something wrong, and now no, it wasn't like that. It was like I was making that connection,
Draw a dagger.
explicitly making that connection.
Shit! Cuts across belly. Nick, get the saber. It hurts.
No, you're a Borg.
Damn it!
You're going to the reclamation vat.
Oh right. And walks back in. Swallows old body whole like cobra.
I think an interesting argument to that are some of these, some things that aren't as common as a cup. I just kind of looked up a few examples. I think a good one is
Human skull.
rotary. When we think of rotary,
My first
I
thought
think-
is a telephone.
right? Or like I think I've heard
Piece
of a
of
Rotary
machinery.
Club, but in Maine, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, they're roundabouts, traffic
Oh.
circles.
Okay.
So if we say rotary, we may not all be thinking about even remotely the same thing.
See, it's
But as soon as you mention that they're talking about a roundabout, we get closer.
Yes, we do.
We don't
but
know if
maybe
it's one
other
lane
people, maybe the people who call it roundabouts or if you only call them traffic circles, you hear a roundabout, you're like, what the hell is that?
see. I knew it as a roundabout before I knew it as a traffic circle,
Right.
Yeah.
and I just found out it's called rotary. But to me, rotary, that sounds like cheating, man.
Well, and the bubblers.
Because okay, rotary first and foremost, that is a fucking adjective, and I don't like adjectives being used as nouns.
Huh.
The English language is already complicated enough. We don't need to fuck with it anymore in this
Sorry.
way.
I'm sorry to anyone to the northeast because the next exemplar is the bubbler.
Well,
The bubbler.
It's a bubbler.
The bubbler.
It's a bubbler. It's a water fountain.
oh,
Okay.
I know that one from my mom and Nana.
But it doesn't necessarily make the. Make
But
It's a bubbler.
you know what?
But
At
in,
least that's a
in
fucking noun.
Rhode Island,
True.
it's a bubbler.
Which is funny because it sounds like a verb.
well, I just had an
It
idea.
is a verb.
You know,
It is the thing what makes it bubble.
A bubbler. That is like a tool.
Oh, a thing what makes it bubble. It's
Well,
yeah.
make it a noun, right?
It makes it a noun.
Right.
It's
you're
like runner.
What are you trying to say?
Running is
well, I was just about to violate the English language even more by proposing that roundabouts and traffic circles and rotaries now be called surroundsy boundsies.
We don't need another one.
Too bad.
All right, we'll see if it sticks.
Only if we abolish all other terms.
I will make it my life's mission to make sure that doesn't that doesn't stick. I will abandon every other pursuit I have.
See, now I'm seeing something like, election of 2040. Dave wins the presidency on the
platform.
not even the platform, because
An executive order. I'm
No.
signing an executive
the
order.
platform is a wide range of tissues. This is a plank. He
This is the
wins
only
on the
thing I
plank.
care about.
Anything else? Fuck it. Leave it to Congress. This one thing? No, we are ordering the shit out of this
Yep.
motherfucker.
I write one executive order and then I'm totally fucking Coolidgeing it. Fuck everything. I'm not saying a
Yep.
fucking
And it's-
word.
And as some presidential scholars put it, he's going to Coolidge it and then go, Cleveland off.
I just learned that some places call tomato sauce gravy. They're wrong. It's
They're
in
objectively
Philadelphia, Bronx, Boston, and Chicago.
Give me some of that gravy. That's
They
tomato
call
sauce.
it gravy. That's not okay.
I don't want to think about
If I
spaghetti with
ask
gravy.
for gravy,
Okay.
If you
and
call
they
it
give me
tomato
tomato
gravy,
sauce, I will lose my mind.
Okay.
if they called it tomato gravy, you know what? I might accept it.
Okay.
Well, that even changes, like, the usual insult of Chicago deep dish from being, tomato soup in a bread bowl to being tomato gravy in a bread bowl.
So it's a stew.
Yeah, it's a stew in a bread bowl.
Anyway. Who was the last person that had a relevant point?
Sorry, yeah, we kind of got distracted by
You got on the rotaries.
things that
Right.
we might think of differently, even though we might think
The
that
barriers
it's
of
a common
language.
term.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we
Yeah,
call
yeah.
some, yeah. But and like, going back to the traffic circle and roundabout, I'm not saying the other one, or you're fucking bullshit, pointing at Nick. There is the numinal traffic roundabout circle.
Yeah.
That,
It is what
that
it is.
everyone can conceive of. That regardless of what we actually name it, it's still it.
Yeah. Right. But, which is an interesting... No, I don't want to go too deep into this because it's another rabbit hole. But you talk about the numinal roundabout, which is a tricky thing because it's man-made.
And it's also tricky, 'cause if you're hammered.
Yes. Yeah, well, I've never had that problem.
No,
Are
there's
you
other
saying,
problems
like-
with people hammered.
That is true.
Are you saying taking the roundabout is tricky because you're human?
Apparently,
Yeah.
some people have trouble driving drunk.
I mean, we've all seen that.
How was
There's
it
a
like,
roundabout.
you
You're
drive
driving. You're driving past it at 3:00 in the morning, and you notice there is someone's just pimped out Mustang that has plowed through that motherfucker. We've all seen
Okay.
it.
I was about to say that this program does not advise anyone drive drunk because
No.
I was afraid that that's where that
Yeah.
was
No,
going.
it was a
Unicycle
joke.
drunk.
Oh, dear.
Yeah, you're only allowed to unicycle.
Can that be
drunk.
like
I was
an
going to say,
asterisk?
if you can unicycle drunk, you've earned the right to unicycle
Yes.
drunk.
I think we need to make that an asterisk. Like, P.S.
We
no
do
matter
not
what we said on the
advocate.
show, we do not advocate the.
Please drink responsibly.
We don't advocate you doing anything illegal.
Well, yeah, that's true.
That
We never advocate you doing anything. I thought that's where you were going to say.
there is one thing
and
we
I'm
That
really
actually-
disappointed that you didn't say.
That
it.
actually adds a really, really nice extra level to the term arbitrarium.
we advocate you do one thing and one thing only.
You discovered the secret definition.
This is our official motto now.
We advocate you do one thing and one thing only. Listen to all episodes of the Arbitrarium on repeat while
Yeah.
sitting on a couch and having, just chained there, doing nothing. Maybe sitting in a cave, watching shadows flicker in front of you.
And listen to us not agree on what to do.
Oh, I wanted to make a joke about one of the ads that we're going to be using, but I can't because it's not in one of the episodes yet.
Oh,
The Christopher
soon
Lloyd.
to come.
Yeah. Anyway.
We
All
just
right,
got a
yeah,
new
so
sponsor.
we are
Yeah,
going
so-
way off topic. In fact, I think we might want to call it here because
Well,
we can't.
we've
stay
got 10
focused.
minutes left, technically. It's,
So we
we're
can
20 minutes.
wrap up
So-
with final thoughts, I think.
Right, so final thoughts. I had an explanation of how I think the two things sort of blend together and what I think of what reality is constituted of. So let's see if we can sort of do that for everybody else as well. That was my intention with doing that, but I think we maybe I'm not sure we did that. We'll go clockwise. Colorful. How do you think those two things interact, or where do you stand on that?
I think I touched on this a little bit before we got off topic, but I do think that idealism a little bit outweighs materialism because I do agree that matter exists without me, but I have very precious memories with some of my things that if certain things, like pictures of my grandmother or her blanket that I have got destroyed, it doesn't matter if someone buys me a new one. That the memories that particular thing had means too much to be replaced by something that is the exact same thing. You can buy me the exact same thing at the store. It doesn't matter. It's now no longer my favorite thing because, like, the blanket, I still sleep with it every night. When she passed away, I got it. And I've slept with it since she died. If that was destroyed and someone was like, oh, here, I got you a new one.
You wash it.
It doesn't mean anything. I wash it. I wash it. It doesn't mean it. Like, it doesn't lose any of the memories, which is the most important. It can get ragged. It can get holes. But it still means the same to me. Right.
Well, okay, now here's the clarification question, we'll say. In that situation, do you believe that the thing existed before... So, we'll say this. Do you believe that the material blanket, we'll say, existed prior to the idea of the blanket?
Yes, and I think that's where it's like it's still rooted in materialism, in the fact that it was always a thing. And I
so
didn't have
the material
to
gives
think
rise to the ideal.
Yes, but because it is a thing, I was able to give these thoughts to it that and no one can replace it.
Right.
The crucifix.
The material gave rise to the ideal, but you don't want to downplay the ideal because there's significance.
Yes, because the ideal is the most important part of that to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think so. I'm changing a little bit as far as which side I would lean more towards.
It sounds like you still lean more towards materialism, but you have an appreciation for idealism
exactly.
that you didn't have prior.
I weigh it more in significance to my life.
Right.
But materialism exists. Like that is a thing.
Right.
That is. I won't deny that blanket was there before anyone. I didn't have to think about it for it to be there, but. It means more than anyone can replace. So, like, idealism, I would definitely lean more towards that.
It was a blanket before it became your blanket.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And I don't know if it made sense, but those are my words.
Yeah, no, actually, I think that's where a lot of people tend to fall, actually. Garrett?
I'm going to take the pragmatic cop-out.
What's that?
Okay.
Ballot check.
Yep. So, which is more important? Which holds more sway? That is kind of dependent on what you're looking for at that moment. What do you need? If you're trying to find, we'll go back to the cup example. If you're trying to find out what the hell this is made of, well, you can give it a think. You can think, all right, it should be made out of, I don't know, brick. But no matter how much you think about it being brick, it won't be brick.
I mean, technically it kind of is. It's ceramic.
Ceramic and brick is different. It's not porcelain, is it?
True.
It's not made of meat.
But you're going to have to approach it from a materialistic standpoint to study its matter. It depends on the question you're trying to ask. That is going to direct you to one school of thought or the other. And as such, neither school is more or less valid. Depends on what you're going for. You're not going to find the meaning of life by studying science.
Right.
Because that is a question outside of the scope of what science can provide you. It can tell you how life does things, the chemical structure of it, how DNA forms, how gametes operate, miracle of birth. It can tell you how those things operate, but it's not going to be able to tell you why those, or how those two people fell in love and created a kid.
Well, actually, it might think that it can tell you that.
Yeah,
But the value that you place on those things is
Right.
what it can't do.
It's wrong.
It was
So-
entirely because Jenny had large breasts.
Someone with a very odd love story. That's wrong.
I applied the electrodes and knew she was mine.
So you,
Not that odd. Okay.
you shouldn't. And this is, I'm surprised we haven't touched on this coming up or through this entire episode. But materialism has some very weighted socio-political aspects to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had notes on its connection to Marxism, but
Well, not just Marxism, but laissez-faire capitalism I'm not going to say it can be just as destructive because it wasn't, but it could be damned unjust. And really what you end up with is a corporate bordello. But anyway.
I just imagine being invited to an orgy and it's business casual.
if
Yeah, it's you have to get the eyes wide shut.
if you're
masks.
trying, if you're going to try and build a system of governance or something like that, build a policy to try and address something, you cannot look at it from a sheer scientific perspective. You can't do it.
Oh, yeah, we've talked about the problems with that.
Yeah, because people are not interchangeable. I mean, yes, they're all made of the same matter. You get two people who weigh the same. Chances are, if one was made of antimatter, you'd have perfect conversion. But that doesn't change that they are different people. They're going to make different choices because they have different perspectives. They have different experiences and different sentimentalities, which is mostly what you were talking about.
It's the context they bring to it.
Yeah, I was like, even the
it's
same
the
brain
context.
chemistry. It's like technically they start out with the same potential, but their experiences shaped them differently.
I think twin studies really push towards that more idealism worldview. But it's not in any way more or less valid than the other. You have to take into consideration both, especially when you're talking about big things.
Yeah.
Like you don't want to have someone who's never studied the water table in charge of environmental water protection. But at the same time, you don't want to have someone who's only ever studied environmental water protection trying to write policy.
Right.
That no, there is a happy medium there.
Yeah.
It's hard to achieve, but just because something's simple doesn't mean it's not. It doesn't mean it's easy.
Well, you said just because something's simple doesn't mean it's easy. That's kind of true. You can try picking up a heavy fucking
Shooting Old Yeller was pretty simple.
Yeah,
That
Shooting
was
Old
not
Yeller
easy.
was not
That's
easy.
that's true. I mean, I encountered something where I could just put down a boot and end life, and that was heavier than I thought it would be. It was a mouse. I don't like stomping mice.
Yeah, that's that material. Materialistically, it's easy to do.
It's simple. It's a
It's
simple act.
a simple act, but idealistically, it's not.
The
Depending on the person, but
Yeah.
yeah, I think
If you're say an exterminator,
it's what you do.
yeah,
it's what you do. When I was doing pest control, I like rodents. I like rats. I like mice. I actually do.
You had a pet? Well, a pet one.
Yeah, I used to have a pet rat. I miss Mrs. Scabbers. That was her name. She was a little albino. She died of cancer after living for 3 years, which is a good run for a rat.
Yeah.
I just want to clarify. You said her name was Mr. Scabbers?
Was Mrs. Scabbers.
Oh, Mrs. Okay.
We named her Mrs.
I heard
Scabbers.
Mr. Scabbers and just got real
Because
confused,
I've had
so
a few
I wanna make
drinks.
sure.
That's what
I
happened.
just want to make sure.
You know, you don't have
Pronouns
to
are hard.
I am not judging her. I was just clarify.
No, you were judging me. Yeah. That's what was going on
No,
there.
I just I
Mrs.
was
Scabbers
confused.
was a saint.
She bit me once.
And she
She
would
like-
still be a saint if she was Mr. Scabbers.
Yeah,
I
but-
wanted to clarify.
And plenty of saints killed things.
They're
Some of them
it's-
became saints because they killed
Yeah.
things.
And you can one of the things that just popped in my head is the one of the most iconic lines from Full Metal Jacket, which is said in the Marine Corps. There are many rifles, but this one is mine.
The material exists and is then given meaning.
And that is kind of a martial fusion of materialism and idealism, where yes, this is the rifle, it's capable of this, 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 and this, but you need to have someone with the experience and the willingness to use it for it to really be what it is.
Well, yeah. Well, meaning, let's say, idealism and meaning is based on, to a large degree, utility.
There's also the
Well,
maybe exclusively.
with the
could I
with the
You'll get. It's okay. Hang on.
with that the rifle example, you have to have all these things built just so to make an accurate rifle. But that rifle will not achieve its potential without the person behind it,
Right.
who
Same.
has to have that experience, that expertise, and the willingness to pull the trigger.
Right.
the same
Hopefully in the right cause.
Right.
the same thing occurs with common baking ingredients. Think about it. The differences between certain cakes are based entirely on the idea that made them, and well, how they've been assembled by the hands involved. I mean, I can take water, sugar, and flour and make something very simple, a poor man's pancake, but someone else can take those things and turn it into, I don't know, fucking sugar sculpture.
Well, what I was going to say, and finish out my thoughts, was going back to the rifle thing. That person, yes, there's that the rifle and the person using it is the fusion thereof. When it is fired, is it a target? Is it a illegal assassination, or is it someone taking out a tyrant? That is all idealistic.
Yeah. The
And-
determination of which one those things, because it's actually, I would argue that it could be all of those things.
Well, I mean,
A target, every one of those is a target. You're aiming at something in an
when I
effort to
said
hit
target, I meant
it. Right.
like
Oh, well,
target
like
shoot,
paper
that's what I
target.
meant.
Oh, okay, I gotcha. Yeah.
Material
Is-
shapes the idea. And
Right.
the idea.
so that's where I'm going to finish there.
Okay.
And I rambled on for a bit.
We
Now,
all did.
your
We're good.
final thoughts.
Nick,
You started on my final thoughts before that.
you got to speak up a little bit. You tend to be quiet on the recording.
Anyway, the point I was getting at is material starts the idea. The idea then shapes the material, and it just keeps going like that. It just keeps, loop-de-looping.
What?
Well, the material thing comes first, and then a perspective comes along,
Yes.
and
Okay.
And then
infuse meaning into that thing, and then that
thing-
meaning starts to
Yes, and then
redefine
that-
what the material.
and then
is.
that material can change because of the ideas and what the hands are doing to it. It is.
That's where it gets interesting.
It's the craftsman versus the soldier,
Ooh.
because the craftsman can turn glass or turn sand into glass, which can then turn into meaning, which can then just return back into material because no one can even recognize it used to have meaning.
Well, a soldier can take a perfectly living human being and turn it into something unrecognizable.
Yeah,
Oh.
Yes, I mean, if you want to get gory about it, but
yeah.
Yeah,
And
I
at
mean-
that point, they aren't really anything meaningful aside from a few carbon stains and puddles of meat.
And a body count, which is,
Yeah, that's an idea.
Anyway.
But you see what I'm
I just
getting
need a
at.
sigh button that I can just hit. Working on it.
Okay.
right. So okay, it's all. I mean, it's still all material, but when you have something that can exercise some sort of power over that material,
Yes.
then they have the ability to reform it into something
Yes.
that, while it's still material, it in some cases creates a completely new material. But at the same time, it's changing the meaning of the
Yes.
of the collection of those materials into whatever that
And
new
that
thing
person might also begin thinking of something other than just a pile of sand. Or a pile of flour and sugar.
Well, the
Or a pillar
arbitrarium
of
started
salt.
as a thought.
It's true.
Yes. And now it's a thought that's recorded, and it's a thought with lovely sponsors.
And to Nick's credit, it has spawned many, many, many other things.
I will say
Many other ideas.
it was a thought before it was a thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we're the ones that
Well,
you're the ones that made it a thing.
And like I
That the
said,
vulgar materialists would argue, well, the thought was a material thing.
Because
Yeah.
it was in a brain, and so like somehow, some way that
Something.
can be quantified in the scientific
Right,
world.
Right.
Yeah, when you're talking about vulgar materialism on that,
it's
They
icky.
can bite me.
well,
I mean,
I kind of look at vulgar materialism as just as a negative philosophy as nihilism. Because if you're really going to try and make any kind of determinism or determination from vulgar materialism, you have to get down to the quantum level where nothing at all is deterministic.
It all
So-
goes wobbly.
If you're going to just make all your assumptions and decisions based off nothing but materialism, you're going to go nowhere because you can't make predictions with you can't make any certain predictions. You can put things on a sine wave, but that's not how human decision works. Human decision is very digital, not analog.
Right. Well, and I've
Am I
heard
watching TV today or am I not? There is no I'm kind of watching TV.
Right. Well, see, I've heard arguments that it's like, well, ideas, they live forever, right? Well, it's like, okay, I can see what you're trying to do there. And me, as somebody who's both materialistic and idealistic, this is me making an argument for the materialist. Like, well, okay, I can see the argument that you're making, but if there were no brains around to continue the existence of the idea, is the idea still there?
We'll just write it down in a book. It's not in the brain anymore.
Yeah, but
Well, someone has to be able to read that book.
right.
Yeah, it's not like anyone's going to be speaking Lakota ever again. Like, I heard the last, truly fluent speaker, I think who was in Dance with Wolves? The last, true fluent native speaker died, and it's now a lost and dead language.
Yeah,
Right.
we know nothing about the religion of Cro-Magnon. We know they had one. We know it existed. We think it had something to do with his lion-headed statue. We don't know what that figure was.
Smoke weed every
There's
day.
so much we don't know,
Right.
and we will never know again, outside of a time machine. But now we're getting into
And that's that we haven't done this yet, but here it goes. That is a topic for an entirely different podcast. All right, so
we're
I
having
think
it this time.
if does anybody have anything else
have
to
we
add on
spoken our
that?
piece?
Have we spoken our piece?
Yes,
I think so.
I believe we all
Okay.
have.
It seems to be the conclusion is, at best, it's both. It seems highly unlikely that it is entirely one or the other. There's something to be said that it's both, but it's easier to make an argument for the idea that everything is materialistic than it is to make an argument that everything is idealistic.
Right. It definitely things exist, but how much do our thoughts weigh in on that?
How transcendent are ideas? I think that's what it boils down to, and we don't know. We don't know. That's the thing I was talking about there at the end, where it's like if there's no brain around, or no entity or mind, we'll say mind maybe is a better word. If there's no mind around to carry on the idea, what is it? The idea is not immortal, as many people frame it, right? So there's that.
It doesn't have a human lifespan, that's for damn sure. But
Right.
All things can die. Ideas included.
Yeah. If there's nothing around to carry on the idea, then it dies.
Just because my job is also fact checker, I did want to say a couple sources say that there are about 2,000 people that still speak Lakota.
Okay, I think it might have been Sioux?
Damn.
Maybe I can't.
I'm just recalling the
yeah, I
data
just
from the movie.
like as fact checker.
That's a hell of an oversight.
Like, in case
Oh,
there
no.
was anyone
Just
who
gonna throw something
got
in.
mad about
Well, to
that,
any-
but we fixed it. It's okay. We're letting them know, but.
No,
It
if
is
Nick gets something wrong, I
becoming-
have to throw something at him.
To any of our Sioux-speaking listeners, I apologize. So,
We're devoted to fact checking, so we did the thing.
Yes.
We were responsible
I
about
did
it.
my job. Yay!
Good job. You get head pats.
All right. All right. I think we've totaled almost 2 hours on this one, which I figured it was going to run a little bit long.
yeah.
But I think
We're at like an hour and 40.
something like
And
that.
no raised voices.
No, we did
It's-
good. This was a much tamer subject than animal.
This was
uplift.
fun in a very different way.
Yes,
yeah.
Sometimes the flat out argument ones are fun.
they can be. Yes.
This was a nice, dense cake.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
Nietzschean fudge, if you will.
the Nietzschean
Until
fudge
next time.
better than the Schopenhauerian. What the hell is the adjective for Schopenhauer?
I don't fucking know.
What?
Schopenhauer?
I'm not even gonna bother with it then.
No one
That's
should.
good.
Bye.
I think we're all good.
No one should bother with Schopenhauer.
Bye, everybody.
Kant!